Welcome back. Here with us on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Tensions are escalating between Russia and Ukraine, and this has a potential to threaten the recovery that we are witnessing in Indian economy. India imports 85% of its crude oil requirements. Geopolitical tensions between Russia and Ukraine are leading to supply disruptions. In fact, Brent this season, amidst this geopolitical tension, has already experienced the level of $100 a barrel. Right now, it is much lower. It's around $92 to $93 a barrel. We have not really seen the oil marketing companies pass on the hike to us in India, maybe due to the ongoing election season. But many experts believe that soon after the elections are over, we should be prepared for a shock. As a result, fearing a spike in inflation, stock markets have been quite volatile already, not only due to rising prices, do rising prices feed into inflation, but also increase the amount of LPG and kerosene subsidy the government is required to pay. In fact, the RBI could be forced to increase interest rates as well. So far, the Reserve Bank of India has maintained status quo on rates. So in a nutshell, a war-like situation or any sort of escalation between Russia and Ukraine is not going to be good for the Indian economy. So let's try and understand from our guest joining us this evening the options that are available to India and what should be India's approach in this particular crisis. Joining us on the broadcast this evening is Deepak Vohra, former Additional Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. We have Jagdish Shettighar, who is Senior Economist, former member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Government of India. RS Sharma, former Chairman, ONGC. Tushar Gupta, who is an economist, also live with us. And we are joined by Maroof Raza, Group Consulting Editor, Times Network, also this evening. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Maroof, I want to begin the discussion with you. The latest update that we've got is that US President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin have in principle agreed to a summit over Ukraine. This is according to the office of French President, and that too only if Russia does not invade Ukraine. There is a bit of a stability in stock markets, at least in the oil prices for now. But what do you make of this entire situation, and how should India be looking at it?
I think that is the essential question, and there are a few pointers. The first is that while the idea of a summit has been pushed hard by French President Mr. Macron, the final dates and the contours of how the summit is going to shape out has yet to come out in the public domain clearly. Yes, the fact that they're both meeting they're both going to be meeting has had a positive effect on the market because there's been an easing of tensions apparently, and the stock markets and the oil and energy markets have both responded positively. But having said that, we must understand a couple of issues. The first is that the oil and energy pricing is always hinged on the state of affairs in the world. So if there are tensions between big powers, particularly between consumers and suppliers, then the oil markets and the speculators who fix the pricing of the oil markets tend to shoot upwards. For example, Europe is dependent on anything between 35 to 40% of its oil and gas requirements from Russia. And Russia has sent out feelers that in the event of things getting bad to worse, one of the issues that Russia could exercise leverage with, short of a full-fledged war, would be to restrict or cut down Europe's supply of Russian gas and oil. Simultaneously, there are other countries which are also American friends, which is on the east of Russia, that is Japan and South Korea, who are also large consumers of Russian coal, oil, and gas. In most of these countries, the Russian supplies are in the range of number 2, number 3 position of the main energy requirements of these countries, apart from Saudi Arabia being one of the primary suppliers to countries like China, which is not going to face a disruption, whatever the levels of tension, because China and Russia are in league together globally these days. The other aspect is that in the event of tensions, the European supplies will have to be made up by another country from the Gulf region. And I'm told there have been talks between Qatar and the United States for Qatar to supply gas and LNG to Europe in the event of a Russian blockade. And finally, and most importantly, the Russians have made it clear all along that they don't intend to right away invade Ukraine. They will wait for when the opportunity is correct for them, for going for military action if all other options fail. Because once military action starts, then diplomacy has failed for that moment. And if diplomacy fails, then all your other leverages that you can exercise on a country goes for a six, at least for a while. So therefore, I am waiting and watching how Russia would respond to US feelers. There are news items to say that Russia has already won the major part of this standoff, which at least US political scientists like John Mearsheimer have been on record to say is a problem that has been created by NATO and the West, whatever the apologists for the Western world might tell you. And finally, and most importantly, India, while a very, very small importer of Russian coal, oil, 1 to 2% of India's requirements, India's primary requirements are based out of the Gulf region. And the Gulf region, I feel, if the war doesn't spill over, and if God forbid, if there is a war, it doesn't spill over to the rest of Asia, India would not see much disruption in supplies. India would only have to cope with higher prices, which is hinging at $100 a barrel. And this is really positive for Russian economy because Russia is one of the largest exporters of oil and gas in the world and coal. And if the money continues to come in well for Russia...
So directly, Maroof, you're telling us... Yes. Okay, so you're saying that directly India won't suffer much as far as disruption to our supplies is concerned. But Deepak Vohra, I want to understand from you, as Maroof was also trying to suggest to our viewers, that probably Russia is waiting for some kind of an opportunity. We know that this conflict between Russia and Ukraine is not new. But why is it suddenly that, you know, Russia wants Ukraine so badly? And what is so controversial about Ukraine's NATO ambitions?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always an honor and a pleasure to be on your outstanding channel. I'm a little intimidated by the experts that you have, Mr. Shettighar, ex-army officer, Mr. Raza. You have two other outstanding people, Mr. Gupta and former chairman of ONGC. So I'm a little frightened. I'm far away from the nation's capital. It's very cold where I am. And if I stumble, please forgive me. Ma'am, may I begin by saying happy birthday? Even though there are some clashes between Ukrainian separatists and the Ukrainian military, the manufactured crisis is over. World attention is shifting and a new European hotspot has arrived. Today, 21st of February, European Union foreign ministers have discussed ways to prevent Bosnia and Herzegovina from breaking up. And that Dayton Peace Accords is now has been flushed down the toilet. Your question is very, very interesting. What is the issue? Ma'am, do you remember a fellow called Mikhail Gorbachev? I met him a couple of times in Madrid. He had been promised by another character called George Bush when Mikhail Gorbachev permitted the implosion of the Soviet Union that NATO would not come to your doorstep. They lied. The West lied. 5 expansions, 4 under Gorbachev's watch, 1 when he was prime minister and 3 as president. Now he says, if you're going to position your missiles and weaponry on my doorstep, brother, I'm not going to have it. There are 14 countries that have joined, and all of these are from the former Soviet space, ma'am. I have served in that area for much of my career. I was your ambassador to Armenia, Georgia, Poland, Lithuania, served in Uzbekistan, in Ukraine. I know that area. May I claim that I know it a little better, perhaps, than not the people on the panel, but some others who are watching. So what do we see happening? What does Russia say consistently? I do not want Ukraine to join NATO, period. Why? Ukraine was, when it was a part of the Soviet Union, the second largest country in the Soviet Union, had a huge amount of nuclear missiles, which it then abandoned in return for money, etc., etc. It still has the technology. Says, no, you've got all these other fellows. I don't want Ukraine. That is my bottom line. That's the red line that I will not allow you to cross. Ma'am, you might have heard of a country called Georgia. 2008, they were poking Moscow in the eye. Putin was then prime minister. He sent his tanks down the Rocky Tunnel, South Ossetia. I was posted there. And within 24 hours, the Georgian army collapsed. What happened to the president? He was also Mikhail Saakashvili, young fellow like the present stand-up comic who's the president of the Ukraine. Mikhail Saakashvili was poking, really taking panga with Vladimir Putin. And ultimately what happened, Saakashvili lost his job, his citizenship, and now he's on hunger strike in jail somewhere in Georgia. This is what happens to very aggressive young people. So, final question. How does one join the NATO alliance? आप सब बात कर रहे हैं कि NATO में चला जाएगा. It's a very complicated process, ma'am. I participated in it when I was your ambassador in Armenia. I was very close to them. We helped them. First, you have to have a partnership for peace program. Then you have to have a membership action program. Then you have to tell them that you're very good boys and you're Europeans and you're going to fight for peace and democracy, etc. It's not going to happen. Now, oil price you have referred to, ma'am. It has nothing to do with the Ukraine crisis. As Raza Saab so brilliantly pointed out, oil prices have been rising for the last 1 year. And a year ago, our oil minister said there are two reasons for the oil price rise: declining production and maximization of profits by the producers. This has not happened because of the Ukraine crisis, man. Besides, I've also heard some people say, oh, India will suffer because it won't be able to import oil and gas from Ukraine. Happy birthday. Ukraine doesn't produce oil and gas. It's a net importer of oil and gas. Ye pata nahi kahan se ye khabrein laate hain, man. The reality at this point of time, Putin and Joe Biden are going to talk. And ma'am, I'm not in the business of predictions. May I tell you, based on my experience, what's going to happen? Here it is. 3 points. NATO will say, we are examining Ukraine's request, but we are suspending it for 20 years. Ukraine will say, well, we are going to strive very hard to see what happens after 20 years. And Russia will say, I'm not going to beat up the Ukrainians. Everybody will have tea, go home. I love you, you love me. Oil prices will come down.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, clearly for India, as Mr. Maroof also explained to us, there's not going to be any kind of a direct impact as far as our oil supply is concerned. It won't really disrupt our oil, but it is impacting our stock markets. It is impacting the Brent crude price across the world. As a result, the international petrol and diesel prices are rising. Of course, in India, there has been no change in petrol and diesel prices. Maybe, like I mentioned, the election season is on, and many fear that come 7th of March, polling is over, and next day onwards, you'll see the spike. Third point, metal prices just now have surged to the highest price in over 10 years. Okay, let me just complete. Now metal prices. We might not be getting oil and gas from Russia or Ukraine, but metal prices have actually surged to the highest price since 2011 right now. Key ingredient for making stainless steel. As a result, overall, the import prices of metals is something many fear will go up. And that's the worry that India has, that the world has.
Sorry to butt in like this, man. Thank you for giving this opportunity. The tanking of the Indian stock market has very little to do with Ukraine. It is linked to what happens on Wall Street, where I am at the moment. Every time Wall Street sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold, man. And why is Wall Street tanking? Again, very little to do with Ukraine. It's the crisis, it's supply chain disruptions, it's the pandemic, whatever. Every time it happened, 30 years ago, Wall Street fell, we fell. 20 years ago, it fell, we fell. 500 years from now, it'll fall, we'll fall also. So Ukraine has nothing to do with it. That's the only thing I wanted to say. Sorry about this.
Okay. Jagdish Shettighar, so US today is sneezing, according to our guest here, Deepak Vohra, former Additional Secretary MEA, not because of what's happening in US and Ukraine. How do you read the current situation and the impact that we are witnessing and the fear that we have here in India?
Who is that for? Is that for me?
Mr. Jagdish?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, as it has already been pointed out, so no doubt that wherever there is a crisis between the two countries, it would have the adverse impact on crude oil prices. But more than the apprehension of the war between the Russia and the Ukraine, It is other factors, because as far as the rising trend in the crude oil prices at the international market is concerned, it is mainly because of the pressure from the Saudi Arabia, which is a more influential partner under the OPEC. Because of the financial health of the Saudi Arabia, it has been putting a pressure on the OPEC to raise the prices, and in order to raise the crude oil price, obviously their strategy is to cut down the production. And besides that, there is another important development, that is the Federal Reserve deciding to have restrictive monetary policy. Because whenever there is a change in the attitude of the Federal Reserve, especially leading to the rise in the interest rate, that is their policy rate, that would impact the approach of the foreign institutional investors who have been playing a major role in our stock market since 1996. So because of the expected rise in the federal rate, the financial portfolio investors, they started withdrawing. And their withdrawal not only impacts the stock market, no doubt there has been the fluctuations in the stock market, but more importantly, whenever the portfolio investors withdraw from the country, it would have the adverse impact on the rate of exchange. Say one, the crude oil prices already started going up, but when it comes to payment to the crude oil in terms of the rupee, whenever there is a depreciation of the rupee against the dollar, that will be the additional adverse impact, because we have to pay more, not only because of the rise in the crude oil prices in the international market, but also when you have to pay in terms of the rupee. With the depreciation of the rupee, we have to pay high prices. Now, question is what we are supposed to do. One, of course, as far as the apprehension of the war is concerned, it has to be resolved through a diplomatical effort. Now, as far as the attitude of the Federal Reserve is concerned, now we cannot interfere because they have got their own domestic compulsion, and we can't help it. But we can minimize the impact of the withdrawal from the portfolio investor, and for that, only way out is the going ahead with the economic reforms. But when it comes to the reforms, because last time also, when there was hike in the federal rate, the portfolio investors did not withdraw from the market, mainly because at that time, the government of India initiated IBC, that is the insolvency and the bankruptcy court, which was a game changer. So similar reforms measures are required. But when it comes to the reforms measures, because the timing is not, because the government doesn't have the luxury of introducing tough reforms measure right now. One, because the government now has to prepare for the forthcoming the parliamentary election. Now we know that as it is, the government was compelled to withdraw the farm law. Now I don't think that the government is in a position to introduce any other tough reforms measure. But there is another alternative. Another alternative is that is the, as far as the impact of the rising prices, though it is not in our control, the government can try to bring the petroleum products into the GST net, which of course can be decided at the GST Council, where all the governments controlled
Mr.
by the
RS
different
Sharma,
parties
I think we'd like to come in here because that is being seen as a magic wand to, help us solve this entire crisis as far as rising petrol and diesel prices are concerned. Every time it happens, people say it should be brought under GST, but the states clearly and the center is not ready because of the easy source of revenue this really is. But Mr. RS Sharma, I want to understand from you, in our energy market, what is the kind of impact are we witnessing because of Russia-Ukraine crisis? What should we be prepared for if there is escalation and if there is war?
Now, let me clarify a few things. Today, Russia is the largest oil producer in the world. When we say OPEC plus, so OPEC plus Russia, that forms OPEC. So Russia is the largest oil producer. And in case this results into, this war or a direct conflict with Ukraine and this NATO-US forces also come. So definitely there's going to be big negative impact on the Russian oil production and the exports. And right now, if we have seen the prices continuously going up in 90s and moving up to 96, 97, that is because of the apprehension that this attack may happen. And let me tell you, India today is the most vulnerable when it comes to the crude oil prices because we import 86% of our domestic consumption. For the last 3 months, government has somehow not permitted this oil marketing companies to increase the prices. But my assessment is, as of now, this IOC, HPC, BPC, they are incurring losses on their petrol, diesel sales, 7 to 8 rupees per liter. Come 10th of March, what will happen? I feel the impact on the Indian economy is going to be quite devastating. So we should pray that the war doesn't happen, things cool down, prices cool down, because we know in the budget assessment also, they have assumed crude oil prices at $65 or $70, I don't know. And these prices, as it is, are sort of, I would say, unaffordable. It will create a lot of instability in the market. So this oil marketing companies and the prices go up, we know the inflation, exchange rate and all the cascading effect that's going to happen. So we wish this doesn't result into a big conflict and things cool down. Otherwise, I'm deeply worried about this petroleum product price increases happening and this negative impact on the Indian economy all across, in all sectors.
What you're telling us is significant. 7 to 8 rupees per liter. That's the kind of loss currently oil marketing companies are seeing. And you also are of the view that it will be passed on to the consumers after the elections are over. Tushar Gupta, who's an economist, also is with us on the broadcast. Tushar, won't it be prudent really for the companies to pass on the hike so that, by the time we get to 10th of March, it's not like a big loss for the companies and for us as well. It averages out. Why do you think companies are shying away from passing on the hike? Only because of elections?
Ma'am, a steep hike in the fuel prices in the middle of an election of the biggest state in India, just before 2024, is nothing but a political suicide. I'm sure the companies would be desperate to increase the prices, but the political economy will never allow for that. But see, there are two nervous 90s that have always troubled India.
But won't it be bad economics then? Might Absolutely. Be good politics, but very bad economics.
Ma'am, I have to say this. Welcome to India, where the political priorities supersede the economic priorities. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. But there are two nervous 90s that have always troubled India. One is Sachin getting into the 90s. The other is crude getting into the 90s. Now, if the crude gets into the 90s, and let's assume for an argument that it stays there for a long time, it gets to 100, we have a war-like situation, it gets to 110. The repercussions are going to be there. One point, we'll see a steep increase in the fuel prices after 10th March. That is inevitable. There will be short and medium-term pain. Even the economic survey that just came out a few days back, pegs the oil prices to be around $75 a barrel and then putting the growth for this fiscal year at 8 to 8.5%. So, of course, the repercussions would be immediate. But there are some observers or some in the international community who believe that $90 for crude would be the new normal. That is not going to be the case. And the reason is American inflation. Now, a lot of inflation in America is being driven by the gas prices, by the oil prices, if you look at the numbers. And the US goes to midterms just 7 to 8 months from now, the first Tuesday of November. Now, will Joe Biden, who's been struggling to deflate that whole inflation within the economy, want to go to the midterms with crude at 90 or 95 or $100 a barrel? No, it won't. As rightly pointed out by Vohra sir here, there will be a meeting, there will be a diplomatic solution. Everyone will just share flowers and a nice drink and go back home. But you do not expect the 90 to become the new normal when it comes to crude. It's going to ease into 60, 70 very soon. But there would be some short to medium term pain that Indian economy will have to incur. There would be some degree of inflation. There is going to be volatility, just not because of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, but because the Fed is going to be super active this year. It's hypercharged with interest rates. So expect that.
Okay. Maroof Raza wanted to come in. Yes, Maroof.
Well, a couple of points which has come out of the brilliant assertions by all the panelists. The first additional point that I want to bring out is that, the original price of oil exploration and its availability in the market actually hovers in the range of about $30 a barrel in some countries which are, well endowed with oil resources and are able to export it easily, to up to $60 a barrel. But OPEC continues to set the price range in a way that two things should happen. One is the world should not go in for an oil glut because the resources are drying out. We have passed the peak production level of oil that nature can provide us. So unless we slow down our consumption of oil and find alternate resources to other energy resources, we are going to be staring at a horrible situation 50, 60 years down the line. The second thing is that oil prices, anything above what is regarded, has been regarded for decades as an acceptable normal, was about $60 a barrel. Anything above that, and we're looking at 90s, as the wonderful economist explained to us, the 10s, 90s for us, it has another impact on our GDP. So if you have a growth projection of, say, 7% next year, and the whole year round, you're paying $30 more than $60, which was the basis on which you had based your economic assumptions on, or $65. So you need to slice off then about 1% from your GDP projected rates of growth. That's the kind of impact it's going to have overall on our economy. And third and most important is oil prices, anything beyond a figure of $60 is only based on playing to the fears of the importers. The Hormuz Strait will close down, the Russian state will attack Ukraine, and so oil and gas from Middle East will all be diverted there because Europe is more important to the Americans than perhaps India or Chinese consumptions. So all those fears lead to higher pricing. I think what we need to understand is that there has to be a counter narrative developed to all the speculators and the pundits in the market who make you pay a higher price because they put the fear of not God, but of oil prices in you.
Mr. RS Sharma, would you like to respond?
Ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah.
One second.
First of all,
yes, I'll come to you. I'll come to you, Mr. Vohra. Let Mr. RS Sharma respond.
No. That I have already said.
Yeah, I'll come to you.
We import 85 to 86% of our domestic consumption requirements. And when these crude prices, they continue to rule high, I personally apprehend a very severe negative impact on the entire Indian economy across all sectors. Firstly, right now, look at these
Mr. Sharma, shouldn't the oil marketing companies be increasing the price now when we are seeing a surge? Is that the reason why, when crude oil prices actually go down, we do not really see that benefit getting passed on to us? For example, Maroof was talking about the exploration cost. I was just looking at the price buildup of petrol. Right now, if the people in Delhi are paying 95 rupees and 41 paise for 1 liter of petrol, dealers have paid only 48 rupees and 24 paise to buy 1 liter of petrol. And we are paying almost the double because the rest of the component is taxes. So don't you think it's high time that we do something about it?
No, again, then we have to look at the fiscal, how the central government, state governments, they will manage their finances. For both center as well as state governments, the highest the revenue comes from the levy on this petroleum products. So that is the reason it is not coming under GST, and neither center nor states are agreeable to this. The very fact GST could be implemented because that was a presumption that these products will not be brought under GST. So I see no possibility of this petrol and diesel coming under GST, at least in foreseeable future. Gas is the nearest because the total revenue GST on gas is not very high, and next could be ATF, but petrol, diesel, I can very firmly say that will not come under GST, because how the government will manage their finances under these difficult situations. Already the fiscal deficit is agitating and creating disturbance, with the finances of this thing. So right now, I don't know, it's quite, I would say that unpleasant situation. Right now, these marketing companies, they are suffering losses. They are listed companies. You will see that Q4 results of this IOC, HPC, BPC, they are going to be very much negative because of these under recoveries. As per the mechanism that is under force, they are allowed to increase their prices every day, aligning it to the international parity prices. Right now, the product prices are aligned to about 70-75 rupees or $70-75 per barrel.
But then the question still remains the same. If the prices are market linked, why aren't they increasing the prices? Then how are they market linked in India?
Look, those are because they are government-owned companies. The owner has all the, intervention, whether you call it backseat driving intervention. So they are not being allowed to increase. It has been happening every time the elections happen. So that is one area very sensitive. I would not like
and
to
that is why I said it's bad economics for sure. Tushar, quickly make your point. Then I'll go across to Mr. Vohra.
Two uncomfortable realities. To say that the government should pass on the benefit of the reduced crude prices to the consumers is to say that the government should kill the golden goose, which is laying the golden eggs, which is the revenues from the petrol and diesel and all those things.
When you can pass on the hike, why can't the government then pass on, if there has been a reduction?
For reasons...
Is it too much to ask? If the prices are market linked, if prices indeed are market linked, then if there is a hike, then the hike is passed on immediately. But if the prices fall down, then we don't really see that benefit coming to us very soon.
Exactly. The second uncomfortable reality, and this is where I'll conclude my point, is for very purely political reasons. The petrol prices in India will always be linked to the political cycle, not to the markets. This is an uncomfortable reality. I'm not justifying it. I'm calling it an uncomfortable reality that our politics will always dictate the price we pay for petrol.
Okay. Mr. Deepak Vohra wanted to comment. Yes.
Sorry, ma'am, just a couple of things. First, thank you very much for demoting me to additional secretary. It hasn't impacted my pension. I was secretary to government. The second thing I wanted to say, ma'am, at 70, I'm probably older
really
than
sorry
anybody
for
on
this.
It doesn't matter. At 70, I'm probably older than anybody on this panel. You might recall there used to be a racket called the Cuban Missile Crisis, exactly what we are seeing today. There was a fellow called John Kennedy. He told a fellow called Nikki Khrushchev, if you don't get your missiles out of Cuba, I'll blast you. Nikki Khrushchev said, you get your missiles out of Turkey and Italy, otherwise I'll blast you. So they had a lot of vodka, said cheers, the missiles were taken away. That's precisely what is going to happen now. Straits of Hormuz, bahut dur hai. Nothing is going to happen to that, ma'am. There will not be a war. Putin gains nothing by taking over the Ukraine. The Ukrainians detest the Russians. 91% of them voted for separation in 1991. The Crimeans detest the Ukrainians. They love the Russians. We have a wonderful witch's brew cooking there. Joe Biden, what does he gain? At 80, he says, I'm the new Rambo. Great. Americans love him. Secondly, you remember that there used to be an American president, a fellow called Donald Trump. He had asked the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. And this comic stand-up, Zelensky said, "Main nahi karunga." So therefore, Joe Biden owes him one. And that leaves us with Ukraine. What will happen? When Joe Biden and Vladimir the Putin meet for their summit, this gentleman, Volodymyr Zelensky, will be waiting outside serving tea. The match will be fixed between the two. This guy will be told, "Bhai tum extra ho, bahar khade raho." That's precisely what is going to happen. Take it from me, 50 years in diplomacy and counting.
But Mr. Vohra, I have then another question. When UPA was in power, Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, in fact, had said that Russia has legitimate interest in Ukraine with respect to India. Now, what should rather be India's approach in a situation like this? Because so far, India has not really taken any sides.
Which is the right thing to do, because we should not be taking sides at this time. What are the four main challenges facing the world? First is the Chinese virus. Second is climate change. Third is terrorism. Fourth is these new technologies that are coming in, artificial intelligence, whatever. Well, artificial intelligence can never be a substitute for natural stupidity. But we have these four things, we have to find something. Ukraine is an unnecessary distraction. India's position is principled and correct. Ma'am, ek vyakti tha, you probably heard of him, a fellow called Chanakya. He had said, "My enemy's enemy is my friend." He had never said that my friend's enemy is necessarily my enemy. Therefore, India is going to maintain good relations with both. We don't want the cat or catsa, whatever it's called, kicking in because we buy some missiles from the Russian Federation. At the same time, we don't want the Russian, because this character from our neighboring country, a cricket player who says, "I'm the Prime Minister," he's going off to Moscow in a couple of days. We don't want them selling all kinds of stuff to this fellow. So we will keep good relations with both. That is the essence of democracy. Let me assure you, ma'am, the present setup, I know the minister, we were together in the Foreign Service, we served together in Washington. He is the best that we have had in eons. There's no one in the world like him, ma'am. We will triumph.
Okay. Maroof, what should be India's approach?
See, I tend to echo Mr. Vohra's views. And, the eminent Dr. Sanjay Baru recently wrote a very good piece in the Times of India to say the same, that, India has always, even when it was a country, when after independence it was economically much weaker, militarily it was not as strong as it is today, and it didn't carry the kind of clout in global affairs that it carries today. Even then it took an independent stand on a number of issues. So there's no reason for India now to kowtow to the Americans or openly embrace the Russians, as long as it can get on with its own business and give the necessary diplomatic effort, the push that India can give when required. But quite frankly, India's position on the issue matters to India. It doesn't matter to the world that much, because the world has many other countries that they need to see who's going to take whose side. But if we because we've gone closer to the US in a number of ways, the Quad is an example, it should not be taken for granted by those who push Washington's line that why aren't we in a yes or no situation? You're either on my side or you're against me. That kind of attitude doesn't work. I've always believed India's biggest diplomatic strength will lie in being what Bharat Karnad once called the swing state, which means on issue to issue, we take a position based on our own calculations. And has the world ever, the Western world, ever abandoned the French who didn't go along with the Americans in Gulf War II? Or has the Western world ever abandoned the French who refused to join the military element of NATO and shift their headquarters from France to Mons in Belgium?
Right.
Because France had its own reservations. But they've still gone back, ghum phir ke, to the French to say, you must be on our side. So I think India brings a certain amount of heft onto the table, and the world wants us. But if we go openly with the Americans, we're asking for the Russians to embrace the Chinese, and that will have ripple effects on our border confrontation with the Chinese.
Okay. Mr. Jagdish Shettighar, I want to give you the last word. We've heard about the geopolitical situation from our guests. We've also heard about the economic impact it could really have on India specifically. You've been the former member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. What will you advise to the government of the day so that the economic impact is not severe, given the current circumstances?
No, as far as the crude oil price is concerned, I have been arguing that it should be brought into the GST net. Now, I would like to react to what...
But sir, in the meeting of GST Council, sorry to interrupt you there, I covered the GST Council meeting, sir, that happened in Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh just before the election season started. And there, on the request of Kerala High Court, this issue did come in the meeting, and all states unanimously decided that it's not the right time. So maybe that is something that neither the states are ready for, nor the center is ready for at the moment. So immediately, is there something that can be done?
That is where I would like to comment. Because first of all, the petroleum products were kept out of the GST as a strategy because the states were more interested in keeping the liquor and the tobacco out of the GST net. And it was a sort of compromise formula because the cooperation of the states was very much required because the GST, bringing the GST meant the amendment to the constitution, which was required to be endorsed by all the assemblies of the states. Now, as far as the effort to bring to the GST, in fact, the petroleum minister has been articulating about that. And moreover, a couple of months back, when the GST council meeting took place, the finance minister raised the issue. But in the GST council, the decision is taken on the basis of the consensus. Now, with regard to its impact on the revenue, narrowly if you look at, there may be adverse impact on the revenue of the both state and states. But if you look at broadly, if the prices, because even if you put highest GST rate of 28%, my calculation is that the petrol price would come down at least by 30 rupees. Now, when the prices come down for the petroleum products, the cost of production of all, whether they are directly using the petrol products or not, the cost of production will come down. As far as the private sector is concerned, with their profit margin going up, definitely they would be contributing higher corporate tax to the center. Now, as far as the PSUs are concerned, with the cost of production coming down, they will be contributing higher dividends to the central kitty. Now, with the central kitty getting expanded, center would be in a position to share revenue with the states. Anyway, there is a formula which, as per the Finance Commission's recommendation, center has to share the revenue it collects. So there is no need as far as the adverse impact on the revenue of the states and the GST. The only thing is that the both center or the experts at the center as well as the state government should look at the issue broadly. So I feel that is the only way out. And other thing is that as far as its impact through the what you call the depreciation of the rupee, the only thing is that government should ensure the portfolio investors, that is foreign portfolio investors, that it is committed to the tough reforms measures. Now it is left to the government, whether, as I already pointed out, right now the government doesn't have the luxury of initiating the tough reforms measure, and that is a reality.
All right. Interesting points you've raised, sir. I'm completely out of time now, but I appreciate all my guests for joining us here on this very, very interesting discussion today on the Russia-Ukraine crisis that is still a developing story. India is keeping a close eye on it. The world is watching every step very, very closely that is happening. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on Urban Debate. We'll see how the government really responds to the current crisis. Heading into a very, very short break. There's lots lined up for you on the other side as well. Stay with us.